Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Join us as we dive into the world of endurance sports, exploring everything from nutrition to training and how these elements shape your everyday life, both on and off the race course. Hosted by Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian specializing in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. We're here to share insights and real-world advice to help you thrive on your journey. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins.
Hello and welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I am your host, Katie, and I'm actually doing another solo deep dive today. So I wanted to kind of piggyback from my discussion the last time I did the deep dive, which was on creatine, and I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about supplements in general, because I think sometimes it's helpful to sort of set the stage for if supplements are necessary at all in endurance sports, and are the supplements we are taking safe? How do you determine that? What are you looking for with supplements to make sure that whatever you're taking isn't contaminated and it has safe ingredients? And how do you even know if the supplement you're taking is even effective? And so these are all things I want to discuss today. I think a lot of people sort of take dietary supplements at face value. A lot of people maybe do look into supplements a little more and make sure whatever they're taking is safe and effective. But I think there's sometimes an assumption that dietary supplements are just as safe or regulated just as much as any kind of prescription drugs that we take. And that's actually not the case at all. And so I think we do, as consumers, have to be very picky and discerning and aware and do our research when it comes to dietary supplements. We don't want to just take something because our best friend told us to take it or somebody is recommending it, even a professional, someone working such as I in sports nutrition. I actually don't sell supplements myself. There's for me anyways, an ethical boundary there between recommending things for people and selling supplements so that I get money from that, because I don't want to feel like pressure to recommend supplements when maybe somebody doesn't need them. I truly want to recommend supplements when I feel like somebody does absolutely need or would benefit from that supplement. So I just want to, put that out there and caution, if you're hearing information from somebody that sells supplements, maybe they offer really good information and they have a lot of good things to say, but you always want to sort of be having that in the back of your mind that perhaps that person is trying to sell you something. And although they may seem genuine, that's always something to consider. They're also trying to make money. And that is something we want to consider whenever we're looking into supplements. So today I'm trying to really provide sort of that unbiased information and thoughts about supplements and just a little bit more about how you can be an informed consumer of supplements and things that you want to ask or consider when you're taking a supplement or planning to take one. Want to talk a little bit about the benefits, the pros, the cons. I don't want this to be all negative. I think it's going to come off a little bit negative at first, but I also want to sort of end on a more positive note. So just keep that in mind, because I think some of what I'm going to say might seem a little bit negative, but I just want you to understand that supplements are not as regulated as we would hope them to be, and that there can be some really severe risks of taking them. So first of all, let's talk about the benefits. So one of the major benefits of taking supplements is just meeting your nutritional needs. This could be sort of thought out with multivitamins, and I kind of think of multivitamins more as an insurance plan. You take a good quality multivitamin, it's almost covering you for wherever you may have nutrient gaps, but hopefully you're getting most of your needs met through the diet you're eating. So you don't want to be taking that supplement to, mask a poor diet, but we want to be taking the multivitamin to just provide an insurance plan to cover your bases, right? The other thing you can kind of think, and with supplements kind of cover a broad range of things. Actually, when we eat those foods, sports food products, let's say bars, shakes, things like that, that's kind of under the supplement umbrella. So one thing too is just kind of thinking about those things that you consume either before or after exercise that provide that convenience for you. Maybe it's a shake that has some protein and some carbs that you're trying to get that recovery in, and you're busy, so you're going from one thing to another, and you're just using that product to be able to meet your nutrient needs. That's kind of an example of one of the benefits is obviously we want to get those nutrients from food, but sometimes it's just nice to have a convenient option to be able to get those nutrients in another easier way, which might be like a bar or a drink or a protein shake or something like that would be in that category. There are supplements that also have a performance enhancement benefit. So I kind of think of like creatine, which I talked about already. Um, Beta alanine is another example. There might be like bicarbonate. Those are examples of things that actually have some research to show they may have a performance benefit. So those would be examples of something that would actually have a small performance enhancement, but they can be helpful. Maybe sports specific benefits. So, for instance, like, I talked about creatine and its impact on endurance, but it really has the most specific benefit on strength and high intensity sports. So, that would be kind of more of that example there. And then the actual true nutrient deficiency. So, taking a multivitamin is one thing just to cover your bases, but a lot of endurance athletes, this is an example, but a lot of endurance athletes have iron deficient anemia, an iron deficiency, but they're just low, suboptimal. So taking an iron supplement in that example would be helpful and necessary for that individual to be able to bring their iron levels to where they would want to be for their sport. So those are some of the benefits, and those are really very real benefits, right? There is a need sometimes for taking supplements. But let's just talk really quickly about the cons, and then we're going to go into the health and safety risks in a lot more detail. So that is obviously one of the cons is there is the health and safety risk of taking supplements, especially if you just take some without really looking into where the ingredients are coming from and what's kind of going on there. And then also we want to look at the expense. So some supplements are very expensive and they can cost a lot. I think of one that I recently looked into where it was some sort of longevity supplement, and it would be the cost of over $100 a month just to take this supplement. And there's not a strong amount of evidence to really suggest that it works. So it's a high cost for something that maybe works, but we're not entirely sure. So it seems like, a little bit of a risk to me to take something that I'm not entirely sure is actually effective, and then that cost $100 a month. That's a lot of money for a supplement. So we want to kind of think about those two things. I also want to mention, or let's dive in a little bit more to the supplement regulation piece. So it's evolved kind of from some minimal oversight, and there's been some specialized framework with it. But there was a landmark 1994 Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act that was kind of established, back in 1994. And that for the current structure of how supplements are regulated. So they're in the category of food, which it's kind of a self-regulation and safety. So there isn't really a lot of pre-market approval, meaning that like in order for a supplement company to create a supplement, they don't have to like go through the FDA and make sure that that supplement is effective or safe. They can kind of start a supplement company. So it's more regulated like food than it is like drugs. So keep that in mind. So the FDA does not need to, like I said, make sure it's safe or effective. But the supplement companies themselves are responsible for assuring the safety in accordance with the good manufacturing practice standards. So essentially what I'm saying here is that supplement companies are kind of left to their own devices to decide, are we going to make sure that we are in accordance with these good manufacturing practice standards, which they should be, like honestly, like, if that's the standard, then that should be happening. Unfortunately, it's kind of totally left up to mostly like the supplement company to make sure that they're in accordance with that, which I think leaves a lot of issues because, as I'll talk about in a minute, the compliance is totally voluntary. So if a supplement company decides they want to get started, it can there's a little bit of free reign there. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the chance they could get in trouble and have something happen, but that's just no guarantee that the supplement is safe because nobody's making sure as that supplement company is getting started that there's any safety measures put in place. And, just a little reminder here, because I'm sure most people have heard this before, but the supplement industry is like $1 billion industry. And there can be a lot of money to be made in supplements So essentially, if somebody wanted to make some money, but didn't really want to have any like they just wanted to do some quick, maybe make a supplement, make some money. They didn't really care if the supplement was going to be, or their company was going to be, something that was like long standing or around a while, or they didn't really just care in general. They wanted to make money. They could start a supplement and have no oversight, put a bunch of stuff in there that maybe is safe and maybe not, or maybe it says what it has in it. Maybe it doesn't have anything in it. It just says it has something, but they didn't put any of that thing in there. I mean, they can get away with a lot until something happens that's negative. So this FDA does sometimes do some testing, but generally what happens with supplements is the supplement company doesn't get held accountable until there's like an adverse reaction or something that happens in which somebody gets hurt. And so I think that's important to remember, that the supplement companies are entirely sort of making sure that as they're getting started, they're following these practices. Nobody is in there like making sure they're doing things right. So there's always that potential, if you're not careful, that you're going to end up with a supplement that's got something in it that's dangerous. Or if you're an athlete competing at the highest level and you have different drugs that are banned, that you could be caught with those drugs and get in trouble. Obviously, a lot of trouble in some cases. And so we want to make sure that we're careful. And so there are also several instances where products have been deemed unsafe by the FDA. So they're essentially, the FDA is like, you cannot put these things into the market. This is unsafe. But supplement companies, the sneaky ones, the ones that are kind of the ones trying to make money or have a product that works, but maybe they'll find a way to reformulate the product with different ingredients and then resell it. And so there's a lot of instances of this with certain things like tryptophan supplements, ephedra, if you remember that, DMAA, which I can't really say this that well, but methylamine. I don't know how to say that one, but it's DMAA, Garcinia cambogia, Hydroxycut, and Oxypro, Oxy Elite Pro. So those are all examples of ingredients that have been deemed unsafe. You cannot put those ingredients into your supplement, but they're still found in supplements and reformulated because a lot of supplement companies know that some of these ingredients may work, but they're very dangerous. Heart health, liver problems. And so I think there can be a lot of cutting corners that can occur. And so we just want to be careful. I think the biggest thing we want to remember, and this doesn't mean because whatever supplement you're taking is outside of these common supplement issues, but the most unsafe ones tend to be like the bodybuilding supplements, the weight loss supplements, the energy drinks or energy supplements, and then the pre-workouts and fat burner products. Those tend to be the ones that kind of have the worst reputation in terms of safety, but that doesn't mean that outside of that you're safe. It just means that you want to kind of be extra cautious with those types of supplements. And this is interesting to me, but I was looking up some research, and according to a research study published in 2015, there's an estimated, or this is estimation of like around 23,000 emergency visit departments each year attributed to dietary supplements. So, in the grand scheme of all the people in the country, I mean, that's 23,000. I mean, it does seem like a lot though, right? It's kind of like, wow, that's quite a bit. And so, we just want to be careful because they're not benign. And I also think because sometimes we think, oh, it's natural, it's got herbals, it's an herbal supplement, it's all natural. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for us. In fact, there's plenty of examples of natural products. Like one I can think of right away is the green tea extract. And there has been several instances where a really concentrated green tea extract actually causes liver disease and liver damage. And some of the herbals that are coming, especially from China, so wherever supplement company sources their ingredients, it could be contaminated with heavy metals or other things like rat feces. I think there was one thing I remember looking into when I was looking into supplements a while back was an instance where the people in China, where they were making the ingredients for the supplements, they were some sort of herbal supplements. They found that there was rats in the facility and rat feces in the supplement. So I mean, that's kind of yucky, I think, a little bit disturbing. So thinking like just because it's natural and it's an herbal tincture, some kind of herbal supplement does not mean that it's either safe or even effective, really. So just keeping that in mind too. And I think sometimes the herbal supplements also can be a little bit more dangerous in that sense. And then another thing that we want to consider with supplements is just the anti-doping agencies and the anti-doping lists with supplements. If you're curious on what is considered a drug that's in this category, you would want to go online and maybe look for the WADA, anti-doping, or the Olympic IOC. They have lists of banned substances that as an athlete, if you get caught taking or you go and you have to do a P test and they find these traces of these in your urine, you can actually get into a lot of trouble and banned from your sport and lose medals, and obviously you lose a reputation. And this actually does happen in some, like world events, like where maybe you're doing like a championship, like nationals or worlds or something like that, even in age group categories. So we still want to be cautious if we're competing at that level. So I just think one thing I want to kind of mention here with that is that if you want to be careful, then we want to take precaution. And so one thing you can do is just make sure that you're reducing your risk by looking for products that have been batch tested by a third-party certification protocol. So there's Informed Sport, Informed Choice, and these are just two that are well known. National Sanitary or Sanitation Foundation is NSF. So if something that's NSF certified, and this just basically means that these third-party testers come in and batch test supplements for the presence of banned substances, making sure that the supplement essentially has what it says it has in it and nothing else. And so they're just basically making sure that the supplement is safe, and they're batch tested. So they're not testing every single supplement that comes off the line. They're just testing certain ones in batches. So there's no absolute guarantee that if it's NSF certified or Informed Sport, Informed Choice certified, that it's going to be completely safe. What I want to say here is that the supplement companies that go through the process of having this done, they're obviously trying to do whatever they can generally to keep their supplements safe. So if a company is going through this process, they're probably less likely to be trying to be sneaky about putting in ingredients that are either banned or are just contaminated. That's probably the best course of action, especially if for anybody, but especially if you are wanting to compete in a sport that may or may not have like drug testing involved. And so the only thing I want to remind people here is that the NSF and the Informed Sport, Informed Choice third-party testing tests for safety, not efficacy. So just because it's safe, you're like, oh, it's NSF certified, does not mean that that product is even really going to do anything for you. They just went through the process of making sure that it's safe. So at the very least, you may be just pissing out something expensive. Who knows, but at least hopefully it's not going to get you in trouble for a banned substance or get you in the hospital for something that because it's contaminated. So that's kind of the not so good side of supplements, right? Like they actually can carry a risk. And let's just be honest, that's a true possibility. You hear about it sometimes, but as long as you're being careful about the supplements you choose, you should be okay. But let's talk about the actual like some other considerations and with supplements that we want to think about. So it's not just, okay, it's safe, like then we're good, but let's talk about the form the supplements are in. Like not every single form of an ingredient is actually going to be the best for what you're wanting to accomplish. So that's something you might want to look at. And then we can talk a little bit about the dose and other considerations. So I do often recommend that daily multivitamin for people who just kind of want to have an insurance plan and cover their needs. But oftentimes what we have to remember is that you're going to the Walmart or King Supers and just finding the cheapest, multivitamin, that's fine. But I think because of the ingredients, like it's probably inexpensive. Not always, but sometimes it's inexpensive for a reason. They're trying to keep costs down. And so they're using sometimes the less expensive forms of vitamins and minerals. And sometimes that's okay. But sometimes that particular form of the vitamin or mineral isn't as well absorbed. And so you might be taking that multivitamin yes, it's less cost, but maybe it's not as effective or it's not in the form that's really going to be the best for what you're wanting to have with it, which is maybe to be able to actually like absorb it and utilize it. And so sometimes I think thinking about that can be, consideration. And then this isn't going to be a deep dive into like every single form of every single vitamin and mineral and which ones are better, because that would take a long time. But I'll give you an example. So like magnesium. Magnesium has several different forms. So if you've ever looked for magnesium supplement, because there can be benefits potentially for magnesium in sleep, and obviously athletes, it's an electrolyte, so athletes do need a little more magnesium than your non-active individual. So if you go to the store, you might be like, oh my gosh, there's like 5 different forms of magnesium, and they all are similar, but some do something different. So an example here would be like magnesium oxide. That's probably one of the least expensive forms of magnesium, but it's not as well absorbed. So sometimes this is a great way to go if you have like a digestive issue or you're kind of backed up. Maybe you could take some magnesium oxide and it might help you go, but unfortunately, you're not going to absorb as much of that magnesium. So it's maybe not the best form if you're trying to maximize the amount of magnesium your body actually absorbs. Another one, or there's a couple of forms that actually are a bit better absorbed that you can consider as just a magnesium supplement. And that would be magnesium glycinate and magnesium citrate. So those are often common forms found, and those are pretty well absorbed. And then like there are other forms like magnesium L-threonate, which is well absorbed, but also may get through the blood-brain barrier. So there may be some benefits for brain health. So that's an example of where magnesium can have different things that it may do. It may be absorbed differently depending on the form. There's obviously other potential benefits for magnesium, but that's just an example. There's even more different kinds of forms than that. I just listed a few. So I can get a little bit like, I don't know which form is better, but if you're getting the good quality supplement, usually the supplement company has thought about that and trying to find the best forms to put in. The other thing we want to think of, another example here would be like iron. Like if you have an iron deficiency, you even want to maybe consider the form of iron you're taking. So iron, like there's ferrous sulfate liquid iron, which is very potent. There may be chelated iron. So there's going to be like a few different forms you'll see in the supplement, or different ways that it's formulated, or different types of iron even. And depending on the type, like some may be absorbed better than others. Some may be more likely to cause stomach upset and GI upset. Like the liquid iron can be pretty harsh on the stomach. So some people may not actually want to take that form because they end up having a really bad stomach ache, or it kind of makes them constipated. So, we might want to consider different forms of iron when we're thinking about, fixing an iron deficiency, or if somebody has suboptimal levels. Another example would be folic acid. So there's a lot of debate. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of whether or not folic acid, is good or bad, but I do know there are a lot of people who have issues with folic acid. So the MTHFR gene mutation. So maybe they aren't able to utilize folic acid as well. And so they might benefit more from a folate supplement, or even a methylated folate or methylfolate rather than folic acid. So there's different forms. It gets confusing, but I think just remembering that when you're looking for a multivitamin or a specific nutrient, to kind of do a little bit of research to say like, what is the outcome that I want from this? Is it sleep for magnesium? Is it iron? I want to be able to boost my iron levels, but I have a sensitive tummy. Like maybe I want to consider one type of iron over another. Or maybe you have some issues with methylation. And so maybe you want to consider a methylated form of folate or B12. So those are just things, you might kind of want to consider and think about with your health and what supplement you're taking. So just an example there of being a little bit more of an informed consumer and not just picking up any old supplement from the store. If you're going to be spending the money on it, you might as well find the supplement that's going to be the most useful to you and effective, because even the cheap ones, it still costs money. So we want to make sure we're always thinking about that. The other thing I want to mention is that generally gummies are not the best form, because it's very hard to get especially like a multivitamin, like all of those nutrients that we're trying to fit into a multivitamin. very hard to get into a gummy. So you might find that if you pick up a gummy supplement, you have to take like 7 or 8 gummies. I don't know, to get the same amount as like another, tablet-based option. So something to think about. And having worked in the glucose space with CGMs, those gummies aren't always low sugar. So sometimes they can cause an actual like glucose spike. They're not actually probably the healthiest way to do it. So I would say, maybe unless you're absolutely sure that the gummy form you're taking has the effective dose in it, and maybe it's low sugar, I would aim for trying to steer clear of the gummies. Another thing, and this is like maybe the last major consideration with supplements, is the actual effective dose. So we talked a lot about safety and forms and all that, but if you're taking a supplement and you're not even getting the effective dose, then what's the point of taking it? So we always want to remember that, for like our multivitamins, I think the biggest thing we want to look at there is just we're looking at the RDI, or the recommended dietary intake or allowance. That's kind of the percentage of that on the side. You might want to be careful if everything is like 5,000%, that value, then it's probably a lot more than you need. I'd say aim for something around 100% of each of those nutrients you're meeting. And, you don't even have to take, like I take a 2-a-day multivitamin, and I only take 1 a day because, again, I'm just trying to cover my bases. So I don't really need to be getting something with like 1,000% of the RDI. What I really need is a little bit of that just to kind of cover my bases. So I often take a good quality supplement, and I only take 1 of the 2 tablets every day because, again, I'm just taking it as an insurance plan. So it's like sometimes that, when you're looking at multivitamins and vitamins and minerals, that's a consideration. Sometimes for something like iron deficiency, you might want to, if you're just trying to maintain iron levels, you may only need 10 or 20 milligrams of iron a day. Whereas if you're trying to overcome a deficiency, it might be closer to 60 or more, depending. That's going to be sort of nuanced and very individual to each person's case by case basis. When it comes to certain things like our performance enhancing supplements like creatine, there is an effective dose. It does depend a little bit on body weight, but in general, that dose is around 3 to 5 grams per day. And sometimes people recommend even more if you want the brain health benefits. But let's just say for like the general benefits, 3 to 5 grams a day. So if you're taking a supplement and it only has 1 gram a day, it's probably not enough, right? That's kind of where they found the dose to be effective. And let's take another example. Beta alanine, that is a common supplement. It increases muscle carnosine content. So it's like an intracellular buffer, like sort of a buffering agent. So it just helps you maybe be able to do a little bit more work, higher intensity for a little bit longer. And the dose there is about 3.2, 6.4 grams per day. Again, so if you're taking something that only has 1 gram per day, maybe not an effective dose, right? So, and that depends a little bit more on body weight as well. But yeah, like maybe a lot less than that, like a very small amount would be not an effective dose. So you want to be looking at that if you're looking at a supplement to take. You might want to do a little bit of research. Okay, what is the effective dose that I need to take of this? Does it have that right amount? How many pills do I have to take to achieve that? Because, it might be really hard. I think of like sodium, like bicarb, like the basically baking soda, right? Like there's different companies that have formulated that to make it a little bit more palatable. But if you've ever had to take the actual dose, and I don't remember it on the top of my head, but there's a no actual dose per body weight that you have to take of sodium bicarb to actually get the benefit of it. It's very hard to take. It causes a lot of GI upset. But so if you just take a teaspoon of it or a little bit, it's not really going to be effective. You have to take like the dose, and it's actually a surprisingly high amount that would actually be effective to have those performance enhancing benefits. Another thing too, so along the lines there, this is why I tend to stay away from this, but whenever you're looking at a label and maybe it is a performance enhancing sort of pre-workout that has something like maybe it has beta alanine, maybe it has creatine in it, maybe caffeine, but they have some sort of proprietary blend, just says proprietary blend, 5 grams or something like that. But then it lists what it has. I do not buy things that have proprietary blends. Just don't. Because you have no idea what of all those things, how much of each of those is in that. So you would have no idea if it was an effective dose. And sometimes I think supplement companies do this because they're like, okay, we're going to put all these like fancy ingredients that we know people like into it, and we're going to do it in a proprietary blend. That way we can have less of that ingredient. We can make it look really like a great supplement. It's got all these things in it, but we're just going to put a tiny amount of those ingredients in and we'll call it a proprietary blend. So it sounds, like, ooh, it's proprietary, sounds great, fancy, right? But then we're going to charge people like a lot of money for this. And they're not even going to know what they're getting because there's probably a placebo effect anyways. They're just going to think they're getting this and they're not, and it's going to sound fancy. So just be careful about proprietary blends because you just don't know how much is in it, of each individual ingredient. And so it could be the right dose and it very well could not be. So just much better if you have a supplement that says what it is in it, and how much. Creatine monohydrate, 1 scoop, 5 grams. Okay, you know that if you take 1 scoop, it's going to be the 5 grams that you're looking for, right? It's not, a whole bunch of ingredients, and 1 scoop is 5 grams of all of these ingredients, and you have no idea how much of each one is in there, right? So be very, very cautious. I tend to, when I see a proprietary blend, I put that thing right back on the shelf. Unless it like just says what's in how much is in the proprietary blend of each ingredient, then it's not really proprietary, right? So, yeah, just something to think about there. Like, these are tricky ways that supplement companies will be able to make it sound like it's an expensive supplement without actually being expensive, and then they can make more money. And it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, so you want to be an informed consumer here. Interactions with medications would be the last thing to consider. If you're taking like a prescription medication, you just want to make sure that whatever, you're taking doesn't have any supplement or food or supplement interactions. So you can always look this up or ask your pharmacist if there's anything that you should be aware of. An example here would be St. John's wort is a pretty famous like herbal supplement that reduces the effectiveness of birth control and blood thinners. So we just want to be cautious with certain, especially herbal supplements tend to be probably the biggest interactions with our medications, just because some of those herbals have either compounds in them that might make the medication's action even more potent or reduce the medication action. So something to consider. And there's some red flags I also want to mention that you might want to watch out for here. So you really want to be careful with products promising immediate, like miraculous drug-like results. Like I think that's where supplement companies can get into some trouble, is if they're saying this supplement cures cancer, or this supplement does something like that, hasn't actually, like, that's not true, because there is no supplement that actually cures cancer. So by making that, label, that sort of claim, that can get them into trouble. But they can do that until the FDA comes in and says, hey, we're going to slap you on the wrist. So be very careful. Like, if it seems very promising and there's miraculous results and something that you're just like, that sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So just keep that in mind. And the claims that it can cure or disease or treat disease or anything like that, I think being cautious. Like, it's like they're not supposed to do that because they can't claim that. But I've seen it before, and so don't fall for that. And then just too good to be true marketing, a thing where it's like, this will cure, or this will, I don't know, reduce your cholesterol and to normal levels in 5 days or something like that, or you'll lose weight, you'll lose 30 pounds in 10 days or something. That's probably, well, if that happens anyways, that'd be dangerous, because losing that amount of weight in that time is just not a very safe amount of weight loss. It's probably all water and just not possible even. So just those types of claims you just want to be very cautious with. So let me leave you with a few things, like some questions. As you're looking at supplements and you're kind of thinking, okay, well, what do I do to make sure that I'm taking the supplement and it's safe and effective, and I'm trying to do my best to minimize those risks? So these are going to be the things you want to ask yourself. First of all, is it safe? So that's the first thing, we talked about. Does it have that third-party testing, NSF or the informed choice testing? There are other third-party testers out there as well, but those are probably the big two for actual sports nutrition products. And You can always go in too if you're curious and just Google that supplement company and FDA, or kind of looking and doing a little bit more digging to see if that particular supplement you're taking or that supplement company has gotten in trouble before with the FDA, because that information should be available online. So you can see if they've have had any issues with the FDA coming in and having to investigate them. So just looking a quick Google search should give you some information, in terms of that particular company anyways, and what they're selling, and if the FDA has had to get involved. The other question is it effective? So it's great if it's safe, but just making sure whatever you're taking is effective. I think supplement companies are trying to sell you supplements. So they're going to try to make, as without being like it cures something, but they're going to want to make sure it sounds, oh, this is going to boost your testosterone, or, this is going to do this, or it's going to enhance performance. And sometimes they'll make claims that are, maybe not exactly true because they're still trying to sell you something. So if you're not sure of something, if you're like, oh, I don't know about this ingredient, what is it? Is it effective? Is it, what is it? There are some really great resources online. One that I like to use is actually examine.com, and so they don't actually look at individual supplement companies, but they have a lot of information on just a single ingredient. So like creatine monohydrate, for instance, or if you're like, what is beta alanine, or what about sodium bicarb, or caffeine even? Like what are the benefits of these? What's the dose? Like what's the literature say? And the nice thing about that is they kind of do kind of an A, B, C, D like ranking of the actual evidence. Like, is this like really good research? It's like subpar, like, oh, there's not really much. Like, so C and D would kind of be like, there's not really a lot to say that it helps with this particular thing. So they kind of do a nice ranking system where the supplement is kind of like ranked based off the research that we have, and for each particular use that you would use for it. So they kind of have it, with creatine, they might have like strength, like high intensity and endurance exercise, and they kind of rank, in terms of the efficacy of each of the creatine on each of those sort of subcategories. So you can go look there. Obviously, you can look for the actual research studies online, PubMed, or, just kind of Googling research. Again, just Google research on creatine or research studies on creatine and endurance exercise, and kind of find things that way as well. You want to ask yourself, is it permitted and legal to use? Especially, I mean, I think most athletes, you probably don't want to be using something that's like illegal, but if you're not sure, it's very easy to find the WADA, anti-doping lists online. Generally, though, those are, the big categories there are anything that's like a hormone. So like DHEA, like any sort of endosterone, like free, like testosterone or precursor, sorry, to testosterone. Those types of things are going to be banned. A lot of our peptides, so that's a big thing now, is like these peptides coming out that you can inject. That's banned. So there's some of those big ones that, a lot of it's like the pre-hormones or precursors to hormones, peptides, and then there's going to be some others that, are in there, but those are probably the big ones that you want to look out for. And again, just go and kind of look that up, and what I'll do is maybe create a link in this show notes to that list in case you're curious. So just making sure that you're safe, especially if you're an athlete competing at a high level where you might be drug tested. And is it an appropriate time to use this supplement? Asking yourself, is this supplement, should I be using it now, or would it benefit me more at a different time? Like, or even like the timing of it throughout the day? Like, I guess you could kind of think of this like, is it, with creatine, you can kind of take it any time, but like beta alanine might have more of a benefit to take before exercise. So is it even an appropriate time to use in the supplement in the sense of like the day and when it's best to get the best results? Another example here would be like iron. It's not as good idea to take iron immediately after exercise, because when we exercise, we have something called hepcidin, which increases during exercise, and that actually inhibits iron absorption. So you don't want to take that right after exercise. You probably want to space it out later in the day. But even like during the season, is this an appropriate time to use a specific supplement? Like, I don't know, you probably don't want to use sodium bicarb just before every single workout. You probably want to save that one for those really high intensity days or like a race. So you don't want to be just willy-nilly using something especially because that one can sometimes be expensive. So just kind of thinking, is it the appropriate use of the supplement, the appropriate timing, the appropriate time of the season? You just want to make sure you're thinking thoughtfully or giving a lot of thought to why you're taking, like, what is the purpose of the supplement? Like, why am I taking it? Not just I'm taking it because so and so recommended it, or this, whatever. It's because you're actually thinking through a little bit and making sure that you are, actually taking it for the right reasons, at the right time, the right dose, and that, you're thinking of the cost too. Is it, you know, it can be quite expensive to take dietary supplements, and is there a cost associated with it? Could you get that thing through diet? Not everything can be, but some things you can get through your diet, so why not try to do it that way instead? So anyway, I hope I captured that topic okay. I did dive in. I didn't talk too much about like exact specifics, but I did talk a lot about the safety and things to consider with supplements. If you do have any supplements that you particularly are curious about and would love or like me to do more of a deep dive, I'm happy to do any particular supplements. I'm happy to do even like a deep dive on iron deficiency. That might be a good one because there's a lot to think about with that, and protocols for taking iron and how to maximize absorption and what are the like levels of ferritin and some of the other iron markers that you want to look for. So that's an example. I'm always happy to do more of a deep dive into any sort of supplement topic or anything like that that you would want to cover more in detail. But hopefully you found this sort of overview on supplements. Maybe you already knew a lot of it, but hopefully you found it useful. Again, if you're looking for any information on nutrition coaching or nutrition counseling, I do work with all athletes, but my specialty is an endurance athlete. So I work with any endurance athlete when it comes to nutrition. I do some run coaching, so specifically to runners as well. And you can find my information at www.fuel2run.com, or you can just email me at katie@fuel2run. And that's how you can get a hold of me. If you're curious or just want to send me a question or something you want me to cover, like feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to get your feedback. Anything you thought I missed on the supplement discussion would be great too. So thank you all so much. And I hope you have a fantastic day. It's been a little bit windy here, so hopefully the microphone didn't pick up too much of that in the background. I'll see you all later when I do another deep dive, and have a fantastic day.
That wraps up today's episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Endurance sports have a way of teaching us patience, humility, and resilience, lessons that carry far beyond the workout. Progress in endurance sports doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from consistency, discipline, and doing the work when it's not glamorous. Wherever you are on your endurance journey, keep trusting the process and honoring the work you put in each day. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone to help on their endurance journey. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social sites to help build and foster a community where we all learn and support one another. We'll be back with more stories and insights from Coach Justin and Katie. Until then, visit the podcast website at theenduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com for more episodes from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Feel free to send us an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularosaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.